show what you're doing. Let people know. That's a piece that I think a lot of businesses miss out on. Show your commitment, show your recommitment, show that you are proud to be here, proud to employ local people, proud to support local organizations. That PR aspect of talk about it. Don't just do it, but also let people know. Whatever it might be in your community, you're here for it.
Today in the studio, we have Ray Manassa. Ray is the Chief Marketing Officer for the United Way of Central New York with over 20 years of experience as a creative director and copyright specialist. Ray has led marketing, advertising, and public relations strategies for brands in Central New York, across New York State, and nationwide. Ray, super excited to have you on the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
So I am very, very excited about having you on this podcast because I love marketing. I can talk about marketing until my, until the dogs come in. What do you say? Until the sheep come in, I can talk about marketing all day long.
It's, and we're some of those few people that's how we operate. Like, when you find another person that's passionate about it and they want to talk about it and they're like, oh, good, here we go. Like, I found one of my own. Like, yeah.
Yeah. And, in my experience, I've seen people who really embrace marketing, love marketing, can talk about marketing. I've seen people who hate marketing. I don't want to even get into marketing. I've seen people who know they need to do marketing, so they try to do marketing, but sometimes maybe fail at marketing, and pretty much everything in between. So I am hoping that the listeners and the viewers of this podcast can walk away with the power of marketing, understanding marketing a little bit more. So with that, how would you explain marketing, and why do you think marketing is important?
I think, everybody, let's start with you as an individual. There was a movement, years ago of branding yourself and what is your brand and what do you stand for and who are you? And it was basically just, what's perceptions that people have about you. As a company, I think it's, there's always that combination of marketing and the inclusion of advertising and how you think about it. I like to think back to a lot of the small businesses that I worked with that would say, I don't know where to start. I don't know how this is supposed to work. I don't know who I should work with. And it was all of these questions, not about the fun aspect of when we're on the inside of marketing and we're saying, we're coming up with ideas. We're coming up with, ways of connecting with consumers. It's not a bad word, but it gets overcomplicated for a lot of people. That's why they turn to agencies and they turn to consultants and they turn to different places trying to find those answers because they just don't know how to begin that. And it's like any science, there's going to be learned aspects. There's also going to be, that's the beauty of advertising and marketing, is there's an aspect of creativity and doing things that haven't been done before.
So for someone thinking about getting into marketing, okay, I want to dive into the pool. I want to get into marketing. Where should they start?
I'd say starting with understanding who your competition is and who your customers are. A piece that I have reinforced time after time, and I think a lot of it is based on working on consumer advertising, is to think about your audience and understand what they want, understand what they know, and have honest conversations with them. So conversations in terms of through advertising, through public relations, but not overhyping your brand. The consumer's going to see through it. Not overpromising in terms of what you can do. And really having, if you don't have a unique proposition, if you don't have something that makes you stand out, you're going to have competition problems from the start anyways. I mean, that should be part of what you do in your strategy in terms of marketing. But if you don't have that, you probably should step back and reassess exactly how is this going to work, because it should be intrinsic to your business that you have an advantage or you have a reason for the customer to want to come to you. And you just have to share that. I mean, it's just an honest process with some added levels of creativity on top.
When you're thinking about your target audience, are you doing market research? Are you just guessing? I know for me, this has been a key change in my change about marketing is I would always think, who wants to work with me? That was always where it started. Who wants what my product is? But now I've changed it over time to who do I want to work with / who can I create the most value for? So changing it more of who my ideal customer is, not just because they want the product, but because I can serve them the best. When you're thinking about who you're marketing to or who you're trying to get their attention, what are some tips or what are you thinking about when you're identifying that?
Conversation, asking questions, for as long as you can without burning out your maybe your significant other, your wife, your husband, whoever it might be, asking them, what do you think? What do you know? Trying to, start there. Ideally, you can have some market research that will give you the insights. When you live with someone like me who is and this is, we can even go backwards and say, what is a copywriter? Like, copywriter is somebody who's looking at what's happening in the world, in the market, in terms of language, what's happening in terms of the way people are talking about things, and trying to incorporate that and understand what the trends are. Coming up with ideas and phrases and pieces that are going to easily explain that. It's basically being open to research at all times. And if you are my wife, you grow very sick of driving anywhere and having me shout out, well, look at that billboard. Okay, watching TV and going, well, look at that. And then look at this. Oh, it's interesting. They went that direction. They're doing that now. And you're constantly looking to understand, is there a change of position? Is there something that, is there a movement underway that you should really be understanding? This is going to affect my business, or this is going to affect my customer, or this is going to affect my target and how they react to things. And it could just be as simple as understanding not only messaging, but also mediums. Where are you? How are you positioning yourself? And I'll go to specifically where I am with United Way. With United Way of Central New York, we have 100 years of tradition, over 100 years. We've been in the community. People know the brand on a national level, but research will tell you some younger consumers don't know the brand. And so there are people who have lived with it and have been giving for years, decades. There are people who have never heard of it because they're just entering that piece. I have to understand where they are. I have to talk to consumers. I have to, if I'm meeting the parent of one of my child's friends and saying, like, I work at United Way, and then watching the eyes and going, do they know? Do they have a perception? Like, what am I getting out of them? And constantly trying to figure out, what are people's views? How are they taking it? And what does it take to convert them from awareness into action? Will they buy into this if I can explain it this way? What story would maybe bring them into a new direction? How can I best explain it? And that's really looking at someone and understanding, like, what I'm saying is registering or it's not. And constantly kind of reassessing that. I'm really not a believer in the elevator pitch where you walk into a place and say, like, let me tell you about this. And you've got that you've got that thing planned out and you know exactly what you're going to do. You're not interacting with the person. You have to ask questions and answer questions. You have to have a conversation and not just look at it as you're going in to constantly pitch yourself. You're going in to find out what's happening. You're doing market research every time you have that conversation.
Mm-hmm. So it sounds like a marketer really needs to be good at listening, understanding what's out there, and figuring out trends.
Yeah. Ask questions. Be curious. Don't take it for granted that everyone knows who you are or what you do. Ask them, do you know what we do? And don't be afraid to hear no. Just take that as an opportunity to say, well, great, here we go. Also accepting that it's like dating. Like, you're not going to meet someone and immediately go get married. There's going to be a courtship. You're going to have to actually spend time getting to know each other and have a relationship before you get to a point where you say, that person is a advocate of my brand. You didn't just jump into it and go. And that's, there's a misperception around, I'm going to run this ad and somebody's going to be my fan. No, it's going to have to be consistent. You're going to have to reintroduce yourself constantly. You're going to have to constantly do that work that says, here's who we are and here's why we matter.
Mm-hmm. All right, I have a fun sidebar here, Ray, that I have to say. So my first date with my now wife, first time I met her, we were walking around the mall, and every single store, not every single store, most of the stores had signs in there, 30% off, 40% off, 50% off. And I'm walking with her, and, it would be like Express would have 30% off, and then we walk a little bit further, and H&M would have 50% off. And I was just like, Juliana, my wife's name. I was like, Juliana, like, look at all of these signs. They're all using the same font. They're all using a white background with red lettering, and they're all like, they look exactly the same. but these are different stories, different brands, but yet their signage are all the same. And I was like, isn't that interesting? And I had the conversation with her for like an hour about like branding and why they're using that font. I was like, there must be some market research that, the audience identifies with this color and this brand because they're all using it like across the whole mall. And because she sustained that conversation with me for an hour, I knew she was the one.
Yeah. She went with you and didn't say like, okay, you're obsessive over this and I don't get it, and walk away. Like that was the start of realizing that there was some connection between you.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's the same thing in any relationship of a consumer to a brand, or whether it's a regional thing, a local thing, a national thing, there's going to have to be the nature of the relationship. And it might just be transactional. But at the same time, like, that's the power of a brand. Like, to say, why are you choosing to stop at the convenience store for your coffee versus go and stand in line at Starbucks? Like, everyone will argue it's just it's just beans roasted and put into a cup and it's just coffee. But your relationship there and how you feel walking through the door, that's different. Not everyone's going to be at the level of Starbucks, but it's going to affect, once you start to think about, I am more than just a commodity, or I am more than just this. It's, what do I make someone feel like when they interact with me? And that goes down to, I can't stand seeing certain fonts in certain situations and say, why would you do that? And I'm like, okay, because they didn't think about it. Like, they're not concentrating on that aspect of, does this really look like me? Does this seem like something I should be doing as a brand? It's just a sign. It's not just a sign. Like, nothing is just nothing is ever just put this together. Things are more challenging to do. Even the simplest things take more work. And that's why it's in some cases, as a company or as a business owner, or as a small business owner, and you'll say, okay, it's just throw this thing together. Well, it's a marketing professional that you trust is going to need some time to build that in a way that's going to be consistent, cohesive. It's going to speak to who you are, and it's going to work across the brand, and stay with you, because it's an investment. We had that conversation here 4 years ago when we started this relationship with 3G5 about, here's the brand family, here are the fonts, here's the style, here's the lower thirds we're always going to try to use. Like, we are going to keep that. And now I have a library of videos over 4 years that it doesn't show that this is 4 years old, or that this is 2 years old, or that we did this last month. It shows that it's consistent across the board. And those stories, which they were told at that time, but they work at any point, and they'll work 5 years from now. I can go back to those. I can say, well, I have something for you if you want to know more about our work with veterans, or about homelessness, or about hunger, or I can find a story that you can watch. And that's a piece that more and more you have been telling those stories that we can't expect everyone to get in the same way. As we've fragmented in terms of media, as we have had all these different ways, I talk to audiences of, would-be baby boomers that have a tradition of, they used to pick up a newspaper and they'd read it and they'd see all the pieces. And even if they didn't want to know about it, they'd see it somewhere on the page. Well, now you've taken your audiences on social media and you only follow the people you want to know. You only see the things you want to see. You only experience the things that, you can have digital advertising, you can have different pieces, but really investing in those stories, we have to tell them in different ways. We can't just say, okay, we're going to print a letter and a story and you're going to watch it. And no, because you don't have to. It's not in front of you. You didn't have to, on your way to the comics, you didn't have to go past that piece. And those stories that we have been creating, and those things pieces we've been sharing have been, it's an opportunity for us to present those stories in a way that people will watch them and feel them and have an emotion and understand and want to learn more.
Oh, you touched upon so many good things there. I want to revisit a word that you said, because to me, I think this has been transformative in my marketing efforts, is the experience. To many people, especially and to me when I first started, marketing is just paid ads or posting on social media or any other platform advertising. That is usually what people think about with marketing, that is marketing. But to me, I think marketing is so much more. You said Starbucks. So like, I can close my eyes. I know what Starbucks looks like. I know that the person's going to smile at me when I get my coffee. I even can probably imagine what it smells like, right? I know their colors, I know their fonts, they all have the same furniture. There's an experience that goes beyond the product. And all of that to me is marketing. So when you're thinking about marketing and you're thinking about the experience that they're getting, what advice would you have when thinking about that? Is that an important aspect of marketing?
I think the experience, I don't know if we've said this word, but public relations is a piece of this. As far as the person's experience, their touch points with you, it's incorporating that idea of, not just the paid advertising, not just the pieces that you throw out there, but also explaining what your company is doing. There's a big piece, public relations, connections, brands, all these pieces of, I'm going to throw out, kind of not going to run the conversation in a different direction, but the power of local. And that speaks to public relations, that speaks to the advertising, that speaks to the brand experience, letting someone know that you're a part of the community where they live, where they experience life, and that has been a thread that I think in my career, it has been, the power was there from the start, working at agencies, working in radio, working in digital, working in production, working in nonprofits. It always comes back to that is essential. When I was doing national programs for a large radio company that worked with stations and top markets all over the country and worked with brands like Starbucks and Target and Burger King and Home Depot, they were looking for, how do we connect with the local consumer? So even as a brand, their problem, their thing they were trying to solve was, how do we sound like we belong in that place? I think of a large bank that was opening up branches throughout the South, and our program and our creation for them was to work with the local DJs and talk about some of the things in the local market, because they wanted to sound and let people know they were in their community. That's a value that sometimes I think local advertisers, local businesses are like, well, the brands at the top are looking for ways to sound like they belong where you are. You're doing that job and you're kind of like, oh, well, we're not Starbucks. Well, Starbucks wants to be you. They want to be connected to where you are. They want to seem like they're local. And I think that there's a value to a local brand understanding, show your commitment, show your recommitment, show that you are proud to be here, proud to employ local people, proud to support local organizations. That PR aspect of, talk about it. Don't just do it, but also let people know you're putting your money where your mouth is. You are supporting whether it's the PTA or the United Way, whether it's, whatever it might be in your community, you're here for it. That's a piece that I think a lot of businesses miss out on, is they just say, oh, it's just the goodness of what we do. Well, that's, transition into that piece of cause marketing. Show what you're doing. Let people know. Because not only is it good for your brand and good for your company, it's also encouraging individuals to get involved and know about something. Every time that a business says, I want to sponsor something with United Way, it's not just supporting United Way, it's also telling their customers, United Way is something I believe in. It's something that we as a company believe in. This is something that, and it's going to say, employees are going to find out, customers are going to find out. It's going to help us. And it's going to be, look at a brand like United Way, where we are a worldwide brand, but we operate on a local basis. What we do, the money that's given, how we do everything, is going to be based on supporting our local community. And it's, again, story has to be told, but I can't help but reinforce, you as a local brand have the ability to do more. And you just need to keep telling that story and letting people know we care about this place.
Yeah, that's great. So there's so many opportunities for marketing. For someone thinking about getting into marketing, what platforms should they start using? How do they stand out among the crowd?
Understand your industry. Understand your competitors. In some cases, don't just look at your industry. Try to understand what the strategy is and not just the idea. I'll say something that, as a copywriter could drive me a little crazy, and not so long ago or maybe it was long ago, depending on how old you are, but everybody, when everybody was got milk, and it became, everyone just said, got pizza, got screws, got flanges, it was like, it just became this thing that didn't go away. And they're like, see, you're just doing it like got milk. And I'm like, yes. And every time you do that, you're reinforcing the beverage. Like, this is not a advertising tactic. You're just copying something that's been done by somebody else, and it's not growing you. It's not positioning you. It's somebody sees it, goes clever, and I'm thinking of someone else. Like, you didn't create something. And copying that didn't really do anything to move the mark for you. There's a lot of people will spend money on advertising that's not really doing anything, and it's strategically not doing much. It's go beyond that and say, what was that slogan for? How was that being used? And it was, that was the end of it. That's the positioning. That's what you're doing with it. But at the end of the day, if you went backwards and started to work it and say, okay, how did they get there? And it was this desire to have that supply in your house at all times. It expires, it spoils, you have to pick it up at the store, you got to get it out of refrigeration. Like, it's this, you should remember to pick this thing up all the time and put it in here. Why? Because you never want to be you ever want to be in a situation where you don't have it. Like, that was the strategy. There was something else there. There was something else to try to drive you to that point. The payoff was those two words. And, okay, will that strategy do anything for me? Do I have a product that's going to be, it should be purchased constantly. It should be something that you have on hand. Is it something that's going to be perishable? There's aspects of just of working your way backwards and saying, why did they get there? And that's, I think, what people can spend more time doing. You say something, you go, okay, that inspires me. What else went into this? How did they get there? And I think when you kind of reverse engineer and say, what am I inspired by, or what did I really enjoy about this campaign? Why did they do it? And some of that comes down to just reading and watching and looking and, trying to dig in. The internet's great for being able to find people that just want to share their secrets and say, here's why I did it. We had an ad club in Syracuse, and we brought in the two copywriters that were working on that and learned their process. And their process was, we just keep throwing things at the wall. We just keep writing and writing and writing and writing and writing, and like, just keep coming up with more lines and coming up with more ideas and just keep putting things together. And you string them together, and at some point you'll just go like, oh, something works. And this is like it's not a perfect answer for you, but like, I think of like, and this is not advertising, but I'm a big fan of David Bowie, and he, in the early days of computers, had this program that was putting random words together, and he would just let it go, and he'd look at the words and see what formed in a sentence and go, is this something? Do I hear a lyric? Is this a piece? Like, those random combinations are going to inspire you, because if you just think linear of what you have in front of you, not doing that exercise just meant you were only thinking of what the conversation was that was happening. You weren't inspired by things that were different. And I think in the creative process, it's trying to look to other fields, trying to look to other things, hearing words. Sometimes, honestly, there are campaigns that come just from, I'm listening to as many different styles of music as I can, and I hear something and I just go, that word, and there's always notes going on my phone. There's always notes going next on the desk, and there's always Post-its over here. And sometimes it's, here's the word that I think I'm going to go towards. Here's the feeling that creates, and here's where maybe something else comes in, but it's going to be months down the road. You just have to let it happen. And, that's unfortunately the process, but you just have to be open.
Yep. With that, I always find this interesting. For every one good ad, how many ads should suck before I get there when I'm thinking about my brainstorming process?
You ever done a home improvement?
I'm afraid to do a home improvement because I know it will fail.
You start with a plan,
mm-hmm.
and you know what it's supposed to look like. And then you discover that there's, asbestos tile. And you go, you know what? We could deal with that, or we could maybe paint over this piece, or we can encapsulate that, or here's a safe way to take care of this. And then they get into it and they go, oh, actually there's a gas line in the wall over here. We can't take that out, or there's this piece over there. And you adjust. You're flexible. You can get really frustrated and say, to hell with it, just burn the house down, and we're building something else. Or you can adjust and say, okay, here's where I started from. I know the strategy is sound. I know what we're trying to do. As you work through the process of creative, as you work through whether it's script writing or whether it's visuals or whatever you're trying to do in creative direction, and you work through the production process, and somebody says, well, that's not working. Or you get through the whole thing and then you go, this is too long. You have to be comfortable with being an editor and saying, this isn't working. We went through campaign work here where everything, the B-roll, the video, everything was beautiful. And at the end of it, we go, something's not hitting. And I've been doing this for years, and you've been doing this for years, and we're like, something's not there yet. And we missed that human connection on the piece of it. And adding an intro as the last part, and having a spokesperson, and putting her at the front and saying, this is how we're going to connect it. This is how we're going to bring people back in and get them to understand where we're coming from. Is it's not an off-screen narrator, it's an on-screen narrator. It's, a person that you recognize. It's a person who's important to United Way. And be okay with what you planned is not what you're doing. And that somewhat chaos theory is uncomfortable for some people. Be okay with that. Be okay with the plan might not work. The plan might get better. And that's okay. It's part of the process.
Part of the process. I think that's the major thing. I think in this world, so many people are afraid to fail. And they're afraid of well, maybe this, maybe they're even afraid to even write down their ideas because they don't want it to fail. But I think if you can go in with the intention that failing is part of the process, it's made to fail, you are going to suck. You are going to write down 10 different ideas that you might think are great, but then you revisit and they don't work, or you try them out and they don't work. But that is part of the process. And if you can get over that barrier of failure and actually accept that as part of the process, then it's good. Because if you write a piece of copy or you do an ad and it's your first one you ever done, and that's what you run with, you probably did it wrong because you're not experienced enough to actually know what actually hits and what doesn't, because you haven't failed enough to get to that point. So I highly encourage failure to learn and accept that it's part of the process, and then it becomes a little easier. I've just seen so many people just afraid to even take that first step because they think that they need to win right away. We do so many different pieces of content here at 325. We'll spend time on it. We'll edit it. We'll put it together, and then I'll watch it and be like, I don't like it.
Yeah.
Let's just move on. Next one. And that's okay. It's part of the process.
Yeah. And you're gonna, hopefully over years, or you work with someone that's going to help you not fail often.
Sure.
But you don't want to, if it starts off and it's what was on the paper in first draft, and you shot it exactly as it was, and everything just came together. It could be it was a home run and you just did it and then it all worked.
That's rare.
But the things that come out when you have, again, this goes down to, working with great people, working with creative professionals that, in my time in radio, if I wrote a script and I had it in my mind, and, radio is it's a great medium. It's where I went to as a copywriter, went from agency world and said, I want to write radio, and worked for 7 radio stations and with thousands of clients, and saying, we're going to have 30 seconds to tell your message, and it's got to sound different than everybody else's. Working with producers, working with voiceover actors, working with people that would say, oh, I see what you're doing here. What about this? And you go, thank God. Yeah. Thank God there are creative people here that they got it. And then they said, I also have another idea. And I love that. It's a little bit, it takes a piece out of you when you work with people who just go, okay, sure. Okay. Is that what you want to do? Is that how it is? Is that the script? And there's no back and forth about here's what I'm feeling. And what about if we just did, have you thought about trying to go from this angle, or maybe we could try this piece, or what if we did this instead? And we need to encourage, especially, and this is not just a young person thing, but young people coming in have less things that they've already learned or paths they've already been down. I always say that I'm trying to constantly reset and not say, well, I've done this before, so I know how this works. That kind of closed off, I'm an expert at this situation, is going to make things dull. It's going to make creative that doesn't really do anything. It's going to make ideas that don't really move the needle. It's just going to be, yeah, I did something like this. Oh, I did that before. We get through the same process. We did this great campaign. We're excited with what we did. And I'm looking at it now going, our campaign's coming up. Do I know what we're doing? Nope. I've got word lists. I have lots of places. I have things that I'm looking at for inspiration. It is a constant state of not being sure and being okay with that, and trying to find inspiration. And a lot of times that comes from young people who have not been there before and hearing what their new take is on something. Finding a creative community of people that also come at things differently and understanding that we're not really creating things that have never been done. We're just borrowing things from what we've been inspired by. And that is not you're not stealing. We're all stealing. We don't really own it. And, if you get into the Rick Rubin world of the ideas are just in the air and you happen to create it in a different fashion, it came to you and you created it this way and that worked, great. Not to say that somebody else couldn't have had the same idea, pulled it in and done the same thing, but just done it differently, or it hit at the wrong time, or something was just not quite right. There's not a ownership of ideas. There is a trying to find the one that works for you.
Yeah. Oh, so much I want to say here, right? So there's two big points. See if I can get them out in an actual educational manner here. So the first one is, especially for the viewers of this, I would assume most people are not video agency owners or work in video agencies. But when you're looking for video agencies, I think what you're saying, encouraging them to come to the table with ideas, or if you hire someone for marketing, encourage them to come with ideas. I know, I've been doing this for a while, but in the beginning of it, I was just happy that people wanted to work with me. So it was the same situation. You would say, hey, I want a video and I want it to look like this. Cool, great. I'll have it for you. I'll serve it up on a platter. And I was afraid to give my input because I didn't want to lose the gig, right? And I do think a lot of younger people struggle with that because they're just happy to be here versus actually being an expert in it. And now we're more, I had this big group meeting with everyone where I was just like, who knows more about the company, about the people that we work with, the clients, us or them? And everyone raised their hand and said them. They know more about the brand. They know more about their feeling. They know more about what they're trying to accomplish, their goals, target audience, all that stuff. But who knows more about telling stories and actually making videos? And then we all agreed that we know more about telling stories and making videos because we've done, no offense, Ray, but I've done more videos than you have.
I'm pretty old. All right.
You've done a lot.
That's all right.
But so there has to be a roles, and there has to be someone. You are hiring us, and it's so refreshing for you to hear that you're hiring us because you want our opinion. You want our ideas because you know that we've done this before, that we know how to make that story a little bit better because we have the experience of doing that. And I think that is such a really interesting, because to this day, we still have clients that will call up and we need exactly this. And we're like, how about we do that? No, I need exactly this. And then we honestly question, well, do we even want to work with this person? Because it might not go the way it needs to go because, they want to put 20 people in a 30-second video. And we know it's not going to work, but they don't understand that it won't. So those are really interesting conversations that I encourage people to have with either their marketing person or a third-party vendor.
Again, it's also accepting that you hired this agency for a reason. You saw the work, you saw the pieces. I will caution, when someone, and this has been when I've been on your side of an agency, when someone says, oh, we saw what you did for X, do that for us. And you go, that's not really what you do. That's not really an angle that you probably want to take. And then, if there's not that kind of, hard to put into words here. If there's not that piece to go back to where you started, where you're working with the kind of clients you want to work with and you want to be a part of the process with them. If you can't stand your ground a little bit and say, I'm going to suggest this might not be the right place for you. I have an idea that might be, for these reasons, strategically better for your brand or better for what you're hoping to accomplish. That was a brand builder. This is, you are a call to action. You're trying to sell the cars. You're trying to get the home loans. You're trying to do what you're doing. And this is a little too soft. It's a little bit too much. And you have to kind of be comfortable with, I'm not trying to piss you off. I'm not trying to tell you as a client that I don't want to do what you want to do. I'm suggesting, based on experience, that this might not be exactly what you were looking for in terms of results. We can make the video you want, but it's not going to deliver what you're looking for. And here's why. I'm okay with saying no. I'm okay with, but it's not because I just don't want to do it. It's because there's something behind it strategically. At the end of the day, you're a business. And if somebody says, I don't care, give me that, you can make the decision to do that. You're just going to have to determine long term, is this going to work for us? Because relationship wise, are we just delivering on what they asked for? And does somebody come along at some point and go, oh, they've been doing a disservice to you because they've been giving you this thing and it really doesn't affect. And you're like, well, told you so. But that's a struggle, I think, for, anyone on a creative side or from an agency side, is being able to say, based on the research, based on the strategy, based on what we're talking about for your goals, this is not a good idea. Listen, I'm not on the agency side anymore, so I don't have to deal with that. But it's I think that's a frustration, is that, a lot of times creatives will also burn out because they're like, I gave you something that I know was going to work and you didn't want it. You have to be okay with, on being on the creative side, for the disappointment of not being able to do that. But then, you know what? You put it in the folder, you stick it back in I don't know any creatives who don't have a folder full of ideas that they would just go, if I could have just done this. And it might be years down the road and you just go, you know what? I had an idea years ago and I'm going to revisit that. And you do, and you bring it back and you're like, yep, this works. And it still is a good idea. It just needs to be tweaked.
Mm-hmm. I want to wrap this conversation up with revisiting, listening, and experimenting with different things and being okay with failing. Because I do think that, to me, is, as growing through and going through this process of becoming an expert marketer, a marketer, and growing and learning with businesses and doing marketing for ourselves. So I'll set it up with, I've been obsessed with the idea of, how do I get to 100? If 100 is the best of the best, how do you get to 100? And I say this all the time to my crew, but getting from 0 to 80 is relatively easy. So if you want to make an ad, you can get your phone out, you can stick it in front of someone's face and they can say what they need to say. And you can probably get to 60, 70, but getting from 80 to 100, or even 80 to 90, is so much harder, and so much more experience, and so much more failing and experimenting and listening and just understanding. So if someone wants to get into marketing or trying to make their marketing efforts better, how do we get them from 80 to 90?
Practice. We've already talked about this, but it's looking around to people around you, outside of you, trying to understand how people are doing what they're doing and, why they chose to go that direction in terms of their campaigns, in terms of their direction. A little bit of being a student. You can say, well, I haven't been a student, I haven't been back in college for years, but you think about how much, if you professionally are doing your job, you are learning. You are trying to add new skills, trying to understand different places where you may not have experience. There's a great organization called Leadership Greater Syracuse that my wife just went through. And she's a few years younger than me, but it's a group of people who went through this organization that are gaining these new skills and reassessing who they are and how they work within the community and understanding what's in the community, and things might have been here for years that they never knew about. And that I think is a challenge for as you get older and further in your career where you say, I've done it. I got it. I don't need that. But when you're open to, I'm still learning, that's what's important. She inspired me to say, you know what? I want to know a little bit more about politics. And they have a political leadership institute for learning the ins and outs of how to run a campaign, how the campaign finance works. And I'm like, I know enough that, I've worked on political campaigns from a creative side and from working on messaging. I'm like, but I don't really understand all the pieces before that. And this is an opportunity. So I'm going to get into this and I want to learn something. I want to learn a new skill. I want to learn a new segment that is unfamiliar. And I want to be okay being uncomfortable with, I'm not versed in this. That I think is a hard thing, especially as you get further in your career, to say, I don't know that. And I'm okay with saying that I don't know it. And I want to learn about it. And I think that's where, the internet's been great for people to be able to Google and read an article and, they become a Wikipedia expert. But there's something to be said for calling up someone that's in another industry and saying, can I just get the chance to just talk to you and understand what it is that you do and how this works? And I don't think there's ever been a student or frequently students, somebody that has reached out to me and said, I want to know more about this, or I want to learn. I'll say yes. I'll say yes to anybody. Because I want them to say, okay, just like I did, somebody along the way said, here's what you're going to have to learn. Here's some piece, not what you have to learn, but let me help you along on this. And I think that as we miss some of the community aspect, and we could go on this for a whole nother podcast, but as we don't connect with each other on a human basis, that piece becomes less of a frequent run-in. People aren't going out to, if they think about post-COVID, not seeing people, less reason to go out, more reasons to stay home, less random interactions to meet someone and learn about them and understand something. It's back to that where we started on the podcast discussion. You get to watch what you want. You get to stay in your lane and only watch those things that are prescribed to you. If you don't have a community and you're not learning from other people and meeting other people, you can exist. It's fine. You're just going to keep going along and you might not see anything really shake up for years and years and years. But what's the point? You didn't learn anything else. You didn't meet anyone else. You didn't hear a new idea. You didn't find yourself uncomfortable. You have to keep doing that.
Yeah. All right. Well, we talking about learning. We wrap up our podcast with 3 questions here. So, first question, what book would you recommend to our listeners and why?
So, I'm not going to answer that question.
Oh, okay.
I'll answer it this way. Just as it's difficult to say one book. I can say that at different points in my life, different books have meant different things. I'll steal from George Saunders. So he's a local, as in he's a Syracuse professor, a genius, literal MacArthur genius. There's this amazing short story and novel fiction writer that I'll say a lot of his work is something that I admire and something that I read a lot of. But it's he writes nonfiction, he writes fiction, he writes novels, he writes short stories, he writes different pieces, he writes articles. And I think that at different points in your life, as far as one book, it's the book that at the moment, or the story at the moment, or the piece that at the moment might be having that impact on you. And I'll say, so, anything by George Saunders, but current reading would be Rick Rubin and this idea on creativity. I'll say that, from pieces in my past, it could be philosophy, or it should be a varied library. And again, you're talking to an English major, so I can't give you one and say that's
okay.
It's, we are always changing and we're always getting different, influences on our lives based on where we are.
I love that you're a forever learner, right? I think that's such a quality that not a lot of people continue on with. I feel like you alluded to it before. People kind of hit a point to, I know everything. I don't need to learn anything more. But guess what? The world is changing. It's always changing, and you will have to learn to keep up with that change. And there's so much out there to learn. Like politics has been around for a long time. So, like you learn a lot about different things like you're talking about. So I find that really, really interesting. So with that kind of leads to my second question here. You have been doing marketing and working with ad agencies and different things like that for the last, 20 years. What keeps you passionate about this industry?
That even 20-something years, I'm always surprised. Something new. Somebody's doing something. Somebody's rearranged the words. Somebody's taken four words and turned into something that you just go, God, like, I'm jealous. I'm angry. What am I feeling? Like, how did somebody do that? And okay, all right. And you're like, okay, there's always something else that can be done. There's the changes in technology. To see what it used to take. And there's a little bit of sadness that, the industry used to be a lot of small agencies that were helping a lot of businesses and, being able to use a computer and change things that, people didn't necessarily go to agencies anymore. And agencies consolidated and people got, the industry got smaller and it kind of changed in terms of its models. But what that has finally created is this network of people who are empowered as a freelancer to do that job and support themselves and do brilliant work. You have to find them in some cases, but that comes back to community. That comes back to, when I structured the marketing department and I had a marketing associate and I had a third position, and I said, we're going to leave that third position for freelance because there are so many brilliant local people, illustrators, designers, audio engineers, production firms. There's all of these people who are doing this brilliant work that one person alone would have so much to do and things that we can't tap into. And as a company like United Way, where we're saying, you give to United Way, you're supporting the community, we're going to find the local people in our community and we're going to work with them to get that work done. There's a lot of opportunity for people to say like, oh, I found a designer in Venezuela and I'm just going to, and it's like, sure, but could you find a designer in your own market who would understand it, have a passion for it, want to make a difference in terms of their community, and also become a brand advocate? Because once they understand what you do, and I deal with illustrators, designers, all these people that most of the time that conversation will start just like we talked about. Do you know what United Way is? In many cases, they'll say, I think so. Like, maybe it's insurance. And you'll go, no. But you have that opportunity and then you explain and then it goes, okay, I did one conversation here with a person who has their own following and they're going to say, this means something. And I know in this, podcast series, you've got Tommy Lincoln coming in, this phenomenally talented designer, creative, who said, I had that experience where I worked in an agency world. I know what United Way is. I want to work with you on helping to share that. And then working with him and releasing him to do it in his own fashion, where he sees that this is going to be a way to share this message. Working with you and saying, as 325, you understand how the video works. You understand how this goes. And, for you to come to me and say, micro content, like we want to push you into this direction. We want to build things that are going to work better in terms of your social media. And we're going, you're right. Thank you for bringing that. Because if you are going that route and you can bring that piece, like, I want to work with the local firm. I want to work with the local people who care about the community, but also let them do something for United Way in their own way. And that's really the trust factor of what are you working on? How are you doing it? How can you make us look better?
Yeah, that's great. All right, last question. What excites you the most right now about Central New York?
I can't tell the story of growing up in Syracuse and being here without saying, there's a lot of people will feel like this is, they've lived through it, that there were promises made and things that didn't deliver, or, we could be cynical about, this didn't actually happen, or that company never actually did, or this thing went away. And if you go into the comments and you read the things on social media, you could walk away from that and be like, well, I just give up, because it's a concentration on what hasn't happened. We're standing here at a time for what can happen. And I know that the numbers are going in the right direction in terms of the economy, in terms of people who are moving here, in terms of all these things. The numbers read right. But I think that the tone and in conversations with people who live here, we're willing to have a little glimmer of why not us? And that's also led by young people choosing to live here and not leave. Years ago, there was that campaign to try to come home to Syracuse. We're giving you a reason, get back here. And it's like, we've gone past that point. We have to take pride in the place where we live. We have to cross that divide in terms of, people who live in the county and people who live in the city, and getting people to understand that all this works together. But I think that as we start to think about how do we feel about this place, and there's a lot of excitement, there are a lot of struggles. There is always going to be an up and a down. It's okay to have both. It's okay to say, we have to work on this. That doesn't mean we don't celebrate that. Like, that acceptance of, it's not just one way. It's many things are happening once. Many things can be true. And I think we're starting to accept that. I see Central New York and the people here starting to turn the corner on, we are reemerging.
That's great. Well, thank you, Ray.
Absolutely.
I think that's been great here. If you want to learn more about Ray, you can follow him on LinkedIn at Ray Manassa. We encourage you to learn more about United Way of Central New York at unitedway-cny.org. And be sure to follow Studio with 325 in the studio with 325. Be sure to follow in the studio.
In the
gotta
studio.
Make sure in the studio.
Yes.
Follow in the studio with 325 for more conversations with extraordinary people like my friend Ray here every Monday.
Ordinary people.
Extraordinary, ordinary, ordinary, extraordinary.
Occasionally
Occasionally extraordinary.
randomly. Yes. Okay. That works. Yes.
Perfect.
Okay.